All right, Joe, so I guess we should take a look at the internet weather for this week, even though it's a beautiful day outside.
Yeah, I think
not so beautiful on the internet. We actually
no.
have something interesting that cropped up this week, so we'll take a closer look at it. It's very rare lately that we get much change. There's all these IoT devices, always scanning, telnet, blah, 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 blah. But we did get kind of a new hiccup in the internet weather. Let's take a look at just the top 10 ports here in general. Telnet, again, 23 TCP on the top, as it's been for probably a year and a half now, as far as I can tell. But in the number 2 slot, moving up 55 positions from 57 last week, it is 81 TCP, which is an alternate HTTP port.
Okay.
So we're going to take a closer look at that one and what's going on there. In any event, this is pretty much the same thing reflected here. The only notable difference, in my opinion, is the 53 UDP, which was not reflected. This one also is the most sources probing. So this means there's lots of devices doing this at the same time, which usually indicates there's a botnet behind it. And you'll notice the 81 TCP is in there.
I can't wait to find out more.
You can't wait to find out more?
Oh, I'm so excited.
There's still a little bit of a mystery, but we'll take a closer look. The 53 UDP is another one that's a little strange. It went up quite a few positions here. We'll take a look at that chart as well. So let's jump through here. So the first one, 81 TCP, and you can see there's been a really remarkable jump in the number of sources scanning on this. It went from basically nothing for the past 30 days here, 28 days, to about 2 or 3 days ago, it went up to about 45,000 or so sources per hour scanning in unison for this. Again, this kind of abrupt start and this decay pattern, start and decay, is very indicative of bots receiving instructions, the ones that have good bandwidth finish sooner and whatnot with their tasks. So that's why you kind of see this kind of decay slide off pattern here. When it's 40,000 scan sources per hour and it came from basically nothing, that's pretty significant in terms of there's some big botnet out there. First of all, here is the distribution chart of just one of the hours I just picked kind of at random during those spikes there. It's about 44,000 IP addresses that are involved in the scanning. You see large concentrations in the eastern part of the United States and Mexico area here. Europe is very hot as well as the Asia Pac area. I happen to notice that I think Korea, South Korea, not North Korea, showed up with a lot of sources in here, as well as the US, just from my eyeball scanning it. I don't know what that means necessarily, if there's probably just more concentration of these types of devices. So then I guess the next question is, well, what are these things? And when I took a look at it, it's kind of interesting because, well, it's a little interesting. Most of the scan sources I see are also listening on port 81, right? So the guys who are involved in this scanning activity are also listening on the same port that they're scanning for. These devices are getting compromised, and then they start trying to find more of them, more devices like themselves to go compromise as well. There's a web server running here, and not only is it just, not as a web server, it's a go-ahead web server. Go-ahead web's server is an embedded web server that's really super popular. It's like the most popular embedded web server. So it doesn't really tell us a lot about who the device manufacturer it is, other than the fact that it is some sort of embedded device, probably an IoT type device, similar to all the ones that we see all the time.
Yeah.
I wasn't able to determine exactly what type of device this is, but I can tell you it's some sort of IoT device. So my guess is somebody found out that there are a bunch of these things hanging out on this port, and they figured out what the default password is that's commonly used, and they're grabbing them. I'm going to guess, if I had to guess, my gut is telling me it's probably one of those security camera DVR OEM'd versions that get out there. That's just I got a vibe. Sometimes
so somebody found a vulnerability or a default password on this port 81 that's running this go-ahead web?
That's my suspicion. That's probably the likely scenario here, is that they said, hey, here's a whole bunch of ones that nobody's scooped up yet into their botnet. Let's just try to scan the internet with the default password that they use and see how many we can get into.
It's interesting because we have sort of the mature IoT stuff that's happening on 23, right?
Right. That's
and then
been
this
going on
is
for a
sort
long
of like
time.
the infancy, potentially, of one particular type of IoT vulnerability. Sometimes we see the activity before the news cycle, and maybe there's going to be some big, known vulnerability or known botnet that will follow, and we can, kind of point to where we saw the spike in traffic before anything was really known. maybe there actually will be a patch or something in this case.
Maybe, but you know, more often than not, these things don't get patched. This is the problem.
That's true.
I wish they were more patched often, but you never know. Maybe
Yeah.
we'll find out something different about this. It's still very early. It's only been happening for about 2 or 3 days, so I don't
Right.
have really good information yet.
The volume is high, though. I mean, you
The
wouldn't.
volume's very high.
Yeah.
That's a lot of devices, and that's per hour. So in reality, it's probably hundreds of thousands of devices really involved here in this type of activity. So yeah, something to keep an eye on and see how this progresses over the next week or two.